Today's episode of the Women's Sports Matter podcast is sponsored exclusively by Heya. Coaches, are you looking for a better way to communicate with your team? Heya is a simple communication and scheduling app for sports teams. Heya allows coaches to cut down on emails and texts to save a ton of time on team admin. 180,000 teams have signed up for the app, which allows coaches, parents, players, and volunteers to easily communicate and organize practices and games. Do yourself a favor by downloading Heya for free by typing HEJA in the App Store. Thank you again to Heya for exclusively sponsoring today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Sports Matter podcast. My name is Gianna Castro, and I am your host. Again, I'm still at the United Soccer Coaches Convention in Kansas City, Missouri. Yes, I'm not home. I know. I'm going home today, actually, so yay, cold in Chicago. Woo! I love that so much. But that doesn't matter. This is a time for another interview. And I just love talking to people in the world of soccer because it is my favorite sport, especially talking to people involved in the world of women's coaching. So, without further ado, here's today's guest. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. My name is Becky Burleigh. I was the soccer coach at the University of Florida. Just recently had a little stint with the Orlando Pride as their interim coach. And now I am a professor at the University of Florida teaching classes for the master's level in high performance coaching.
I want to talk to you a little bit about your time with the Orlando Pride interim coaching. That's quite the switch because you're not there for the entire season, and you also opted to not be selected to be the head coach for this season coming up. Why did you decide to only coach at Orlando for a few months?
Well, when I went into it, it was definitely a surprise situation. I was on vacation when I got the call. I was pretty straightforward with the management saying that, I really looked at this as probably an interim situation because I didn't really anticipate coaching. I actually very much enjoyed it. The players were terrific. The pro level is something that I think everyone should experience if they have the opportunity to. But I think for me at this point in my career, like a 10-month season is a really long haul.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to commit to that.
I mean, honestly, I was a little surprised when you came in to coach the Pride. Mark Skinner left to go to Man United, which I thought was a fantastic move on his end, going over to England. What was the first thing that you wanted to do when you became coach of the Pride?
Good question. First of all, I think with Mark, it was a good move because his family was over there with COVID. It was difficult for them to be together, and it just made sense for him to do that. It was unfortunate for the Pride because that opportunity fell right in the middle of the season. But when I got there, I think the biggest thing we try to do is just ask questions of the team, get a feel for what was working well before I got there and what they wanted to continue, and maybe some of the things that they wanted to tweak and change. But they're a pretty strong personality group, and so they definitely offered their opinions, which was very helpful. And I thought they were very receptive.
I noticed, the surprise of the year or the beginning of the NWSL season last year was how well Orlando was doing, and then in the end of the season, falling short with some final results from Louisville, I think, knocking them out of playoff contention. What I want to know, what was your immediate plan when you got there in terms of trying to make it to the playoffs? Because it's difficult to make it when there's only 6 teams that can advance. Just want to know, in terms of table position, what your thoughts on where the team was first when you got there.
Yeah, I think we were all pretty disappointed to not make to the playoffs because that was certainly a clear goal going into the season for that team. And, I think the knock that Orlando has had for a long time is the talent that's on the team and why aren't they a regular in the playoffs? But it's not that easy because every team in the NWSL has a lot of talent. And I think a lot of times it's the cohesion of the team and how that works is as big a factor as anything. So I think that when we got there, they were playing quite direct, and it seemed like the players wanted to have a little bit more autonomy in the style of play. So we tried to change that a little bit without making massive changes, but at the same time, giving them the autonomy that they had asked for. And, that's never easy. Like when you're trying to play a little bit against a very athletic league, a team that a league that presses basically. I think there's going to be some growing pains in that. We certainly had our share of that.
So with the Pride's new coach, I just want to know your thoughts on her hiring.
I'm really excited for Amanda Cromwell because, it's the first time that the Premier League has really attracted a college coach in their prime at a really great job at UCLA. So for her to make that move, I think shows a lot of confidence in the future of the league and the future of the Orlando Pride. And I think, all of us as former college coaches or current college coaches really need to get behind her and, give her as much opportunity for success as possible.
Also, with talking about college coaching, in terms of success at Florida, I don't want to, what's the word? You've done so much. I was reading through your stats earlier and I was like, damn, that is a lot of achievements. So you coached at Florida, I believe, 26 seasons?
That's right.
Yeah, and you've done a lot with that team. I mean, you've won some championships, some national titles. That must have been, a fun run of 26 seasons working with many completely different teams and still being able to accomplish, being able to go to championships and tournaments with Florida.
I mean, it's pretty rare, I think, that you get a destination job in your career. And I was fortunate enough to get a destination job very early in my career. And, getting to be the first time head coach at an NCAA institution, because prior to that I was in NAIA school at Berry College. Going to Florida as the first stop is it's even crazy to think about now. But it was just such an amazing time to be part of the athletic association there. It was a pretty young group of coaches. We all sort of felt like we grew up together. Even the administration, we kind of felt like we grew up together a little bit with them. And I just am happy to have been able to stay at one place. It was great stability, which also you don't really often find in coaching. So there's just so many factors. I mean, who doesn't want to live in Florida? So I think I just got really lucky.
I've always wanted to go to Florida. I've never been, and people are so surprised. They're like, "Oh, I'm always going to Disney World or whatever." I'm like, guys, I haven't been yet. Okay, the Florida weather seems nice. Well, sometimes you got to deal with hurricanes.
We got hurricanes and we got that freaking humidity in the main part of the college season.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking the summers and then leading into the fall. But then, you know what? You get to October, November, everybody wants to be in Florida.
Has the weather ever been a huge part of why people, that you're scouting, the reason that they go there? Is it because of, it's got to be because of the history of the program too. Well, besides that.
Yeah, I think climate plays a role because you can train outdoors year round, and people that are serious about their development like that opportunity. I do think there are some people who get a little scared of the humidity, especially if they're coming from the West Coast or somewhere where there is no humidity. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I mean, it's every place has its pluses and minuses. Yeah. I think when teams step off the bus in August and they get hit by that wall of humidity and they're not used to it, they're like, what the heck is happening? But then if we play in Milwaukee in November, we're kind of give us some layers.
Yeah. Oh, that Midwest weather. It's a big yikes. I deal with it a lot.
I stepped outside here when I first got here. I was like, hey, Kansas City is cold.
It was warmer than it is back home. I left a water bottle in my car the night before I drove to my uncle's house before we went to Midway, and it froze.
Oh, yeah,
it was frozen in there. Yeah. No, I would assume that it doesn't freeze in there. Gotta love Florida weather, I guess. Maybe one day I'll go down and
don't go in the summer.
Don't go in the summer?
Go in the winter.
Go in the winter? Yeah. I don't know if I'll have time for that.
Has
hurricanes ever messed with the seasons?
Oh, I think that we have yet to have a season in Florida where there wasn't some kind of either missed practices, delayed games, changing game schedules because of hurricanes. And we had one season where I believe we had 5 hurricanes in the course of a season, which was insane.
So what did you guys do?
I just felt like we were always changing our schedule. Sometimes we weren't training. One time we were trying to get back into Gainesville, and there was a hurricane coming to Gainesville. And we're just like, okay, this is not working. We had to stop in like Savannah, Georgia, or something. I mean, you just have to roll with the punches when it comes to weather because, especially in training, like it rains pretty much every day in Florida in the summer. So it's probably only going to rain for like 20 minutes. So you just sort of have to get used to weathering the storm, basically.
Yeah. So in terms of conference play, the SEC is a pretty competitive conference. All the Power 5 conferences are really competitive. I want to know, in terms of rivalries, what was probably the biggest one for you and your team?
Well, first of all, the SEC, I mean, there is no better resourced conference in the world, anywhere, than the SEC. And I think that's only going to continue to show itself as we go through all these changes that are occurring with all these conferences. I think one of my favorite games in the SEC was always the South Carolina game. Shelley Smith has been at South Carolina forever. Always loved playing against her teams. They're really well organized. It's a competition. Like we're always competitive with each other. It's like really respectful. And that was kind of the same at FSU for us. And FSU's not in the SEC, but we played FSU, Florida State every year. And people expect the Gators and the Seminoles to hate each other. And we just really didn't. We had a very great, respectful rivalry, set lots of attendance records with either venue, but just kind of fun games that I think fans really enjoy.
I want to learn more about the scouting process. I was talking with head coach at Michigan about, what her scouting process is like. I've always been like so fascinated with scouting. I don't know why. I just want to know how you, first of all, conduct your searches on who to bring to Florida and what you look for in players.
Well, that's a good question because I think there's kind of two ways. Like there's some kids that pursue you and maybe they are pursuing you because of some connection they have with the university or they've just seen us play and they really admire the environment. And then there's kids that you pursue that maybe they haven't had as much exposure to you. And so sort of merging those two groups together and finding the best of both worlds. But like for us, it was a pretty thorough vetting process. I think we went a little bit slower than a lot of places because we really wanted to find the right fit, not just on the field. Like that's pretty easy. That's probably the easiest part, is seeing who can fit you on the field. But then also seeing who fits your culture and who, feels like they're going to add to that culture. Like that takes a little bit longer to discern.
I want to go back to talking about Orlando. One thing that I thought was really interesting with this past NWSL season is the T-shirts worn pre-match. Mm-hmm. I want to know more about, how that came to be, why the players decided to do that. I remember, was it the shirts? Something to do with trans rights, I believe. Mm-hmm. Those were auctioned off, right?
That's right. I think actually all of the warm-up shirts at the Pride were each different one was auctioned off to raise money for the foundation. And, I think it's really cool that the players do that because they basically support causes that are like very specific to their wants and desires of what they want to support. So, I remember we had like a Mental Health Matters t-shirt and it fell during the month of like suicide prevention. And it's not like just a gesture. Like I feel like the players are really invested in these causes. The trans shirts that they wore, that was a little bit right before I came, I think. But that, that support in that community for that, like the community of team players was amazing. It's not just lip service. They're actually doing something about it.
I thought it was one of the most like genuine actions I've seen by any team in the world of sports in years.
I agree with you. Yeah. And I think that's pretty amazing that these women who are these high performers take time to dedicate to situations that, whether it's a direct or an indirect effect, like they're willing to spend their time, energy, and money in supporting those causes.
I think I saw from Twitter when the admin of the team was posting about the lineups or just posting videos from warm-ups, I noticed it and I was like, is this just only for one day? And it was like every single game. And I was like, where else do you see that?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty unique. And, I think that's something that college teams could probably take from the pros is the advocacy that those pro teams take. And I know it's harder for like a college student to maybe support them in the same way, but just the awareness that they created with the T-shirts was amazing.
And in terms of the NWSL this past season, there's so many different words to describe it. There was a surprise. Yeah, there was a surprise with Washington Spirit winning the championship, something that I didn't expect as a Chicago fan. But the coaching carousel is what I'm going to call it. I want to know, in terms of team atmosphere, when all these different crazy, hectic things were happening, how did you keep player spirits up?
I think the most difficult part of the season was when the story broke about Paul Riley, and when Mana Shim come out and talked about that, and Sinead Farrelly. And, Alex Morgan, who was part of the Pride at that time, was really like front and center in that. Like she was on like the Today Show and some other very big media outlets talking about that whole situation. And then Mana came down to stay with Alex, so Mana actually spoke to our team directly. And I think it was such an empowering talk because he was basically saying, you can't be quiet about important things. And I know for me, like her talk had impact because I think as a woman in the sports world, like we've probably all experienced some form of disrespect or discrimination. And I think a lot of times we don't say anything about it because it's just easier to brush it aside or not deal with it. But I feel like by doing that, especially like those smaller incidents, it's like it just leads to bigger things happening. And, we're kind of all responsible for the spot that we got ourselves in when we have these two women coming and talking about a very direct incident that affected not just them, but other players too.
I went to the Red Stars Pride game, the rescheduled one. I wouldn't have been able to go the first time it was scheduled, but it was during the week and I was like, oh, I don't have school or work. This is awesome. So I went with one of my friends from high school, and, to witness the togetherness of the two teams and wearing those shirts, talking about Kaya McCullough and others that you've mentioned. It's just like, what a moment.
Mm-hmm. And, that whole 6 minutes that we had of, like in the 6th minute talking about like taking time. And, I mean, man, like it was a powerful statement and they were so unified. It's hard in this day and age to get anybody unified about anything. And so it was great to see not just the individual teams, but the league, the players to all come together. And then when it starts to sort of even spread to teams in Europe, to college teams, like that was really amazing.
It one of the, honestly, the best outcomes of that story being published, just seeing all of the players come together, even teams from across the globe, as you mentioned. It was just like, okay, maybe, yes, maybe we are okay. But the one thing that I didn't like about all of this is the fact that all of the major news outlets were covering this moment, but they don't focus on other things happening within the league. And I think news coverage, which is one of the reasons why I started this show, is so important to spread the women's game, just for any sport in general. I want to know what your opinion is on, with all these bad stories happening within this league, what should these news outlets be doing instead of just covering all the bad stuff?
Yeah, that's a pretty deep question because I think about women's sports coverage, and I think one of the best case studies we have is collegiate softball. And the reason I say that is because college softball is on, their conference tournaments and their World Series and all of that is happening in like May and the beginning of June. And that's kind of an open TV window time. There's not a lot of other conflicting sports. For example, like with college soccer in the fall, we're going up head to head against college football, which is very difficult. And once softball got into this kind of prime time slot, the amount of coverage and the amount of stories and the elevation of these women who are playing softball just came to the surface. Like this College World Series is sold out, like they need a bigger venue. Like all these positive things started happening. but it's sort of like the chicken before the egg. Like the coverage has to occur in order to promote the sport, and then people will come. But like, if you have an event happening and no one knows about it, like that's really challenging. And I think college softball just shows. I think college softball right now is behind football, men's basketball, and then college softball in terms of the most viewed sports in NCAA. Well, that doesn't happen if they don't get that prime time. It's, that time of the year where they're not having to go up head to head against something difficult. And we see that once we put those resources into it, people will come.
I think it also starts on the local level. I get frustrated a lot, and my family hears me complain all the time. But when the Sky were starting to win in the playoffs this past year, NBC5 and CBS Channel 2, ABC7, they were all starting to cover the team. They didn't do that during the year when they were just playing regular games. Whenever something major is happening, this is when these teams start to be covered. But when it comes to men's football or baseball, it's covered right away. It's just I hate it. Yeah.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think there needs to be a more equitable situation in terms of coverage of women's sports and men's sports, because I think what we're seeing is, jersey sales, marketing opportunities, like all of that, like when it becomes available, people buy it. I mean, how many times have we been like, U.S. women's national team shirts sold out? Like, okay, can we figure out maybe we need to make more? And I think that situation is driven by a lot of decision makers who aren't necessarily women. And I'm not saying they have to be a woman to make that decision, but I think that having more diversity in those rooms of decision makers is going to help the overall process of elevating women's sports.
I want to go back to, the beginning of it all in terms of coaching. What made you decide to become a coach in the first place?
I was really in a unique situation at the time because my first coach, my high school coach, was a woman, which back in that day, wasn't really a thing. And so I think I was inspired by her. I think when I first moved, I moved from Massachusetts to Florida when I was 10, and I'd never been on a team, never played a team sport before that. And I moved into town the year before they started a girls team. So I literally moved and the team started, so it was perfect timing. I got into high school, and right before I got into high school, they started high school sports for girls. High school soccer for girls. And so when I went to college, my coach was the first coach I had that wasn't, like a part-time coach or someone's mom or dad. And so I actually saw the possibility of being a coach full-time when I went to college. And that really inspired me. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. But I sort of had to convince my parents that that was actually a real job, because there just weren't that many people doing that at that time, And so I think luckily I had a family that supported me in pursuing that. And I sort of, found myself in the right place at the right time, but also worked hard to take the opportunities. And hopefully, what I can do now is, create opportunities for more women coaches, especially behind me.
Title IX is turning 50 this year. There's a lot of stuff that'll be going on in terms of celebrating that. We got documentaries being made, certain celebrations. I want to know some of your thoughts on what Title IX has done for the world of women's sports.
Interesting question. The University of Florida is celebrating 50 years of athletics right now too. And so it's kind of coincidental that those two have followed each other. But there's some positives about Title IX for sure, because it's given so much opportunity by law to people that would never have had it. But it's also, when you look at the coaching ranks, there were a lot more women coaches coaching before Title IX than there are now. And part of that is because those jobs have become much more high profile, much better salaries, which has now interested men in taking those jobs. So it has elevated the profession, but it has also, I think, sort of created some competition in the jobs that didn't exist before. I think soccer is pretty bad. Our percentage of women coaching women's teams is pretty low. And I think it always frustrates me that, you can have a coach who's like, well, I might go coach on the men's side. I don't know. I can't decide. Whereas like if I wanted to go coach on the men's side, I don't think that path would be as easy as a man trying to coach on the women's side. And so I think overall, there's no question that Title IX has been a huge positive for women's athletics in this country. And I'm sure there's a lot of other countries who would love to have that situation. But at the same time, I think it's had some unintended consequences, especially as it pertains to coaching.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And one thing that, I find frustrating is, it really doesn't apply to college athletics. And the one thing that I think of is last year's March Madness tournament for the women's side, where the weight room situation and just the disparity between the men's and women's is just incredible, I guess is the word I'm going to use. But at least now they both have March Madness naming for both the men's and women's, which is, a nice step, but they obviously could do better.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because they're probably making that step because they got caught in that situation.
Oh yeah, they found out about how much money they were losing out on, and they decided, we'll give you that,
But like one of the things I try to tell the Pride players this year is, the league is about to turn 10. The WNBA is like 25, I think, right now, and it's just hitting its stride. I think. I saw some stat recently about the Super Bowl in its 10th year. I mean, they had to give away tickets. There was like nobody there. They lost a lot of money. And this is the NFL, and so I think there is this, like, not that we should be satisfied by any means, but there is this part of it too, that it's a process to develop a professional league that's a standalone, can financially support itself and all those things. And sometimes that's the price we pay for being somewhat of a pioneer.
With all that stuff, it is now time for the fun part of the episode.
All right, let's do it.
The lightning round. Whoa, I wish I had a soundboard so I could have some sound effect for it, because I love the lightning round. It's so much random stuff put together in one part.
Let's do it.
My first question that I always ask is, if you're listening to an audiobook right now or reading a book or just any book you've read at all, what is something that you would recommend?
Well, Bill Beswick, Changing Your Story, he presented here digitally at this convention, but he has been here live many, many times. And he's one of my heroes. He's been such a great partner with the soccer coaches in the United States. And so Changing Your Story by Bill Beswick, it's on Amazon.
Interesting. I'll check it out and I'll link it down below as always with all the other resources. I'll get into that later. I want to know, if you were to go back into coaching and you had an opportunity to coach overseas, what is a team that you would want to coach for?
I would probably pick that on where I wanted to live. So let's see. I think there's some pretty sweet places in Spain and pretty sweet places in Italy. I think that coaching in Europe for a year, living in Europe for a year or more would be a great opportunity. I have a friend that's doing that right now, and he just finds it amazing.
I've always wanted to go overseas to a game. The fact that the El Clasico is sold out for
Crazy.
The UWCL is just, there's no words to describe it. Just the fact that they were able to do that means the women's game is growing.
Totally.
We love to see it. Would you ever go into broadcasting or commentating future NWSL games or even like college games?
I've done that as a guest. I did it actually, ironically, for the Pride, back when the Pride first started. Let me tell you, like, the people who are good at that need a huge shout out, because that's a lot of freaking work. The preparation that goes in, and when you think about like doing that, you have to do it for two teams, not just one. And I guess if you're the home broadcaster, you start to get your own team down pretty well, but you're still having to do it for an opponent every single week. I have mad respect for the people who do that well, like, Jill Lloyd and Lori Lindsay, some of these women who have been doing some of the soccer stuff. I love listening to Julie Foudy on Color. Like, they're amazing, but that prep is tough. And then when you do a World Cup, like, how do they do the name pronunciations? I have no idea.
Yeah, it takes probably lots and lots and lots of time I don't know if I have the patience for that. Honestly, I can barely talk on this show as it is.
It's a skill. There's no doubt. And you're right. Probably practice is the best way to get better at that.
I would love to know more about, so I'm particularly interested in uniform design. So if you could design a uniform, it could be for whatever team you want, like Gators or Pride. What is something that you would want to include on a jersey?
You know what I like is when teams do like a really alternate random color warm-up shirt for their uniforms. So like I remember this was probably at least 2 World Cups ago when Japan came out in like the hot pink warm-up shirts, and clearly not their colors. And I just think that like it's a trend now. Like you see like Barcelona and all these different teams come out with the great alternate kits, and I just feel like there's so much resistance to that in collegiate sports because everybody's like, no, it's Gators, it's got to be orange and blue. I mean, we used to get a hassle from fans when we would wear black. I'm like, black is a neutral. And so I just think that it maybe takes some of the traditionalists a little while to get used to, but that's what I would do. Try to experiment a little bit with some colors.
They probably don't want to look like UCF.
Could be.
They don't want to look like any of the other Florida teams.
That's right.
In terms of the past players, retired players, is there any player that you wished you would have coached?
I think that one of my, early heroes in the game was Michelle Akers, and Michelle was in Orlando playing at UCF, as a matter of fact. And I played against her in college a little bit, and that was a woman ahead of her time. I mean, I would just love to see what she could do in the modern game because she was so dominant prior, but I think she would be just as dominant now, and I think that would be really fun to watch.
And now she's back in Orlando too.
I know, that's right. New assistant coach.
Everyone was kind of shocked to see that. I was like,
yeah.
Okay.
Crazy because there's like a little plaque to her right outside the facility that we train at, so she's gonna like walk by her own plaque like every day.
Be like, this is here, I guess. So that's nice.
It is kind of weird, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, having your own plaque in the place that you train. Yeah, why not? She's done a lot of great stuff for the world of soccer.
Totally
so
deserving.
My final question for you. So cleats. I'm always interested. This is another design question. Cleats. If you could design cleats, whatever brand you want, what is something that you would do for the Gators? Because I know they got the awesome orange and blue.
True. Well, okay, I have a cleat idea. I have 2.
Okay.
One is like, I love the all black, like Darth Vader looking cleats. However, as an alternative cleat, I want someone to make a light up cleat.
Really?
like kids' shoes that light up?
Yeah.
Light up cleats.
Interesting.
Why not? Night games, amazing.
That's kind of a funny concept. I've never heard of anyone wanting light up cleats.
Hey, then sell. I'm just telling you.
I mean, I've seen like light up Vans, although they were like off-brand Vans. I'm gonna need to see someone design that because I want to know what that looks like. Would it be like just like the trim of the shoe, or would it be like all over, like a disco ball?
Think about it like it could be like upon impact, it lights up.
Every time you touch a soccer ball, it lights up.
Like I was really slow as a player, so I'm thinking anything that makes me look a little bit faster, which is light up please might. I'm all on board.
Okay, well, we got to see you design that in the future.
I'm not sure that right now there'd be a lot of takers on that in terms of companies that would sign up for that, but you never know.
Maybe indoor soccer shoes instead of cleats.
That's true. I'm manifesting it. It's coming.
Okay, manifesting on Women's Sports Matter. Light up cleats that look like the Skechers or whatever.
Exactly.
That's a thing that we'll do. Yeah. All right. So now is the time for you to plug away.
Okay.
Social, whatever you want.
Well, I'm super easy to follow. My handle is at Becky Burleigh. That's a piece of cake. I would really highly for everyone to consider looking at whatdriveswinning.com. That's super easy too. And every book that's in the whatdriveswinning.com series is now a master's level class at the University of Florida, and I'm teaching it. And it's really fun because it's not just like regular grad students that are 22, 23 years old taking it. Like, I feel like most of the people who are in the class are practitioners who are out leading, coaching, all different sports. And it's just a fun class to be a part of because you just get so many perspectives. So you can reach out to me on social and I can give you more information about those UF classes.
Interesting. And I'll link everything down below. Right above, I believe it's the resources section, which, speaking of, it's not my time to plug now. I call it my spiel.
Plug on.
It's just, I put on like a whole voice. My voice goes up a little bit. I pause for a second. And then if you want to follow me on social media, guess what? You can. I'm on 3 different platforms, Twitter and Facebook. It's the same handle. It's at WSM Podcast. And on Instagram, you can follow me at Women's Sports Matter. Speaking of those resources, we've got a register to vote, vaccinations, vaccine.gov. And let's see, we got NAMI, Trevor Projects, NWSLPA. There's other stuff on there too that I can't remember off the top of my head, but that doesn't matter because you're going to go look at the resources section because you're a true fan of this show. Let's see. The season is almost over. The season's ending in February. This is a fair warning. I know I've been saying it, but I just wanted to let you know so you don't get madly disappointed in me because I have to focus on school. Okay. So deal with it. Thank you. Anyway, I also have a YouTube channel. You want to watch this episode? Of course you do. Of course you do. Subscribe to the Women's Sports Matter podcast. That's the name of the channel. And we're about 19 subscribers strong. So I'd really appreciate it if you took the time to subscribe. You can also rate my podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Give me a review. Tell me how I'm doing. Or you can let me know on social media. That is going to be it today for this episode of the Women's Sports Matter podcast. Make sure you go and follow me on socials, posting content every day, maybe too much. That's going to be it for me. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my time at this convention. I'll see you all next time. Thanks. Bye.